background. All right, mate, and we're away. Bert Glover, welcome to the Regenerative Journey, and welcome to the second interview I've done in Lisa's cottage here, just over the road from Wilmot. Have you ever been to Lisa's cottage? Maybe I shouldn't ask. Lisa's cottage.
Charlie, no, I haven't been to Lisa's cottage. I've driven past it many a time.
You never knew where it was? Yeah, right.
This is Little Falls Creek. It's an amazing creek. We just came over. One of three on Wilmot, and
Little Falls.
It's called Little Falls, and there is actually a little fall downstream, about a K, platypus fish, like beautiful.
Bart mentioned the story about the trout, and when he was 5 and everything, which was like straight up, and it was fascinating. Because there's quite a few waterfalls on Wilmot, isn't there? Or a number of them. I don't know. Three. One's quite amazing, beautiful.
Yeah, it really is.
Is that because it's a waterfall? Strange question, maybe. Because I mean, you always think waterfalls are sort of usually national parks and open to the public. That's clearly not. That's just a beautiful thing to have on a private property. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope they don't get people wandering in there going, I've heard about these falls.
We probably should stop talking about it.
Oh no! Did you think I said waterfalls? No, I said something else. I meant gravel pit. That's what I meant.
No, that's fine. And I didn't say thanks for having me. It's a pleasure,
mate,
Charlie.
You just did. That's awesome.
And well done for this initiative. It's really neat someone's sharing all these stories, because that's many people learn from other people's stories.
Well, I mean, it's. I appreciate you saying that. It's because I think I was here. Not the last time I saw you, but one of the last times I saw you was at in Armidale, because I was. You know what it was? It was the day after the Mire grazing workshop, field day, which is what is day 2 is today. 2 years ago, and I just interviewed Sarah Schmuder.
Yeah. That
morning, and we met for coffee, I think, down the road.
That's right.
At your office. So that was 2 years ago. And I said, mate, we're going to hit you up for an interview. So it's taken at least 2 years to do that. So here we are. Looking at Stan, who is living in the house next door. I don't think I'm out of line saying that. His horse, I didn't ask the name of his horse. It's 14 years old, not fine-looking steed. I'm not sure if he wants to be sitting there doing what he's doing right now. If I wouldn't want to be standing there tied up to that post.
Well, if you think about it, though, where else would you rather grow and live if you're a horse than Ebor? I mean, life don't get much better. It's kind of it's like being in the salad bowl, isn't it? It's like you're in a buffet.
Yeah.
If you're a horse, mate, this is heaven.
This is heaven. If there's a good tree to shelter under, and you've got Stan giving you a bucket of chaff twice a day, which I saw him do there before, then I think you would be pretty happy. I wish I'd asked him the name of that horse. It's a fine looking. I don't know if he's got any batteries left in him. Can't quite see that bit, but anyway, we know he's a boy.
Batteries or not, he's in good condition.
He probably doesn't care. He's just having so much fun just being alive here at Ebor. Mate, off the horses, on to you. We are at Ebor, and we'll get to sort of how you got to be here a bit later on, as in this location and so on. Looking out upon it, as I am known to do, Bert, with my guests, is take them to, and this is not where you grew up, but it's not this exact view, but certainly this part of the world, it's, I dare I say, is special to you in some way, shape or form. But being in nature, looking out at, yes, a horse, a beautiful horse, and look like it might be an old orchard or something out there, and green grass of Ebor. What is it sort of, is that a, I mean, you said the horse should be pretty happy. Are you happy to be here?
Oh, yeah. I love this place. I love this area. You probably know this, but for those listeners that don't, Ebor is one of the regions on the Great Dividing Range up the east coast of Australia that's actually nearly, you'd have to fact check this, but it's nearly the closest point to the eastern seaboard, to the coast. And what that means is that we've got good elevation here at Ebor, 1,250 metres, and we attract really good precipitation.
As we have seen in the last couple of days, experienced, felt.
I nearly got bogged to coming up the drive. But, to have that rainfall, and then you've got some of the youngest soils in Australia here in Ebor, these red basalts. So you've probably spoke about this with our friend Bert Davidson, but farms in this part of the world are what we call, they're kind of the V8s of farms. This area, these production systems here from an agricultural point of view, they're the V8s.
Highly productive.
Oh man, and when they go, they're 0 to 100 happens very fast.
Well, it's funny you say that because we had a dinner here at the night before day one at my grazing, the field day, and I've got to be careful of that Bert because it fell off before 3 times in the interview. Was it Al or was it Bart? Oh no, Cole Phelan said, one of the guys down there, he said that some of the area here used to grow a lot of potatoes. Dorrigo is famous for potatoes. I didn't know they kind of make sense that they grew them here as well. But he also said that, might have been Bart, he said, this is where cattle used to come to die. That the native, the traditional native pastures and probably conventional management at that time, the winters are so harsh that, cattle wouldn't do so good up here. If they didn't die, they probably did nothing for the whole winter and then try to make up for it in the spring and the summer and autumn. But you're saying that, I guess, maybe with management and other things, that it's red hot.
Oh, well, you're exactly right in relation to winter. The elevation, it is cold in the winter, and in general terms, again, you'd have to fact check this, but it's like a 100-day winter up here, gets very cold. Young stock, and stock that aren't healthy, they can find it challenging. And, we've run a lot of different enterprises at Wilmot over the years, and we've had to adapt that over time. And we learned early on when we bought Wilmot, the farm, that, we had to think about our enterprise mix and what was going to work, how we'd manage the winter. And, we'll probably get onto that later, but it's changed the whole kind of strategic investment approach for the group, the management of winter. So, but when I go back to talking about this being a V8, when the soils start to warm up, and you come into spring, October, November, it's game on.
Because the rainfall, whilst, like a lot of Burra or Yass, and you're down our way, your old way, is, they say it's Mediterranean climate, what is that nowadays, but not much growth in winter, but is the rainfall here winter adequate, and then that's an opportunity to fill up the profile, and then game on, spring's here. Is that generally what happens?
Well, this is where it's a little bit different to the region you're referring, the Southern Tablelands. This climate here, it doesn't, it might only get 40 mil, 50 mil through those months of June, July, and it's cold, not overly, it's temperature that's limiting. Mm-hmm. And then if you don't get some early September, October rain as well, you can have a challenging spring here. From a seasonal point of view and a rainfall pattern point of view, February is the wettest month on this farm here. But again, you've got the soils that hopefully, they act like a massive sponge. If you can retain your moisture, you can do some things that are in your control to take out those peaks and troughs. It does grow here, Charlie, in the middle of winter, but, in old terms, it does about 9 kilos of dry matter per hectare per day. So there's a small amount there. So, it's not going to set the world on fire. It only sort of maintains a minimal stocking rate.
Don't count on it. Mate, we'll get back to Wilmot and what's happening here, but give us a bit of a rundown on that this morning. Tell me, Bert, where did, as the name suggests, Regenerative Journey is about, my guess, journeys, and dare I say, I choose guess that I know somewhat of their journey, and it doesn't necessarily have to refer to a farming regenerative type of journey. We've interviewed dentists and meditators and all sorts of actresses and things, but there are certainly principles and kind of attitudes, dare I say, and perspectives that are certainly common through that, and there are turning points and there are tension events that sort of a catalyst for change. So we'll get to those. But where do you want to start your journey, Bert? Do you want to, born at somewhere to this and doing that as a child? You can start anywhere, mate.
Okay, mate. That's probably a good place to start. It is a journey, isn't it? So, born and raised on a family primarily fine wool merino sheep farm in southern New South Wales at Yass, and I grew up just following my dad around, wearing his old hat, boots that were too big. I was the youngest of four, and I was just in his shadow. And you know, he would say that I had sheep shit on the brain from the get-go. And so I was always going to be a farmer, Charlie. I went away to boarding school. School and I, you know, we didn't get along so good. And so I spent my early years, and here we are looking at this horse out here, not so happy.
What's going on down the paddock there?
I grew up, my dad loved to ride horses. I really got into horses as well. Back in those days, you know, we did all our sheep work on horses. We'd always find a great flat paddock to have a race at the end of the day. My two brothers and sister, yeah, they rode a horse because there was a job to be done, but weren't all that passionate about it. But, you know, it was one of my passions, and that probably, you know, I got interested in horses, horse sports, and I kind of made up my mind that when I finished boarding school, I was heading to the Northern Territory and I wanted to ride horses, chase cattle, and experience what it's like to be a ringer in the top end. So
ringer from the top end. Where'd you end up there? What station are you on up there?
So
I
worked for a consolidated pastoral company, and at that time they had, you know, assets right across Queensland, Northern Territory, and into WA. They just bought Carlton Hill near Cunnamulla.
Did you get up there?
Yeah, I was really lucky in terms of an experience. So it started out, the stock camp I was involved in, we were like a travelling stock camp. So we would meet in Queensland. We'd have all our horses would be there, the trucks would be there, and we would do, you know, we'd go to a fattening place in Queensland, help with mustering as soon as it was dry enough. We'd then pack everything up, take all our horses, all our gear, head west. We'd do a round at Newcastle Waters on one of those areas. I mean, there was a permanent camp there, but they needed help. We'd go there, then we'd do another little place called Dungown in the Tanami. We were responsible for all those cattle, so we'd do that. Then we'd head to Humbert River, which was kind of our base. We were called the Humbert River Stock Camp. We'd go there, and it's crazy when you look back at it. You know, we there. My head stockman at the time, he was 21.
What were you? What age were you?
I had my 18th birthday in the Blue Heeler Hotel in Carnoon. So I just turned 18.
Have you got a stubby coaster from back then?
I haven't, but
I've got one from some. I've got one. I don't know where the hell it is, of course, but I've got one back.
Let's just say it's the first and the last time I drank bourbon.
What happened? What happened in between?
Oh,
so what year are we talking?
We're talking 1993.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So we'd go to Humbert River. That was our base. We'd had to spend, you know, a couple of months fixing floodgates. We'd muster, have to knock the place back into shape. Humbert River's just behind VRD's. Bit of a goat track to get there. Bit of isolation there. And then we'd go across to Carlton Hill and help out there, and they were opening up as well. So part of Carlton Hill is just probably called Ivanhoe. Oh, yeah. Still a lot of sort of shorthorn cross cattle.
Was it Richard Bradley at the time? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think they were actually still living in the big house that we took over.
Well, I know they were there in 94, because I was up there. A mate of mine was. I was telling you about that Brokeback Mountain story. Before.
You can't put that on a podcast.
I don't know if I did. Well, the horse and the hide, the guy had to devolve. No, it's not as bad as it sounds. Not that that's bad. It's just, anyway, that's what it was. Anyway, that same good mate, he was looking after, he was at the Ord River with Pack Seeds, Pacific Seeds up there. And we went up, mate and I went up there to help him, you know, detassel corn and, do all that stuff as you do, and road sorghum and all that sort of caper. And so we went, and his girlfriend at the time was the station cook at Carlton Hill.
Oh, right.
So I went out there, and they were buddies with the Paspalis and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, it was so I guess I'm getting a little time reference for myself there. Yeah, no, so beautiful part of the world, isn't it?
Beautiful part of the world. And it was in the early days, like there was, I think it was 100 k's from the homestead to the coast, and you know there was no cattle yards out there. It was early days, and this was the 90s. And I remember we did this muster, Charlie, and we were about 50 k's from the Lakina, and I remember saying to Stockman, "What's this muster about?" He said, "This morning at 4, 3 helicopters went to the coast, and they're going to be here in probably about half an hour. They've been flying for 3 hours, and they're going to have a big mob of short-horn cattle that haven't seen a human before." And I went, right. And then we get there, and we sort of set a strategy on how we're going to try and wrangle these things. And the spear grass, even when you're on your horse, is still 6 feet high. So you know, all you see is the spear grass coming to get blade over when the cattle
as they're coming towards you,
and you can hear the chopper behind them. And ones that break out, you know, in those days with Bruce Losis, it was just bang, bang, bang. They're just shooting things. And anyway, I think they started with something like, it was only 400 head. I think we yarded like 100.
Fair dinkum.
Yeah.
And that took all day, no doubt.
Oh yeah, but it's a great education, and you know, makes you think a bit of life preservation comes in every now and then.
Well, I guess I kind of appreciate WHS and safety and all that sort of kind of stuff. That's kind of, you know, in some ways sensible, but at the same time, I don't know. The more we have decisions made for us, and kind of, you know, that, I mean, the less we get to experience and actually, I might get out of the way of that thing, you know. I haven't got a helmet on, and I'm not necessarily equipped with a 2-way radio, but I'm, you know, your own personal safety and responsibility, I think, is not necessarily as important as it is now. You know what I mean?
Well, a little bit.
Did you have 2As on you? Or?
No, we had nothing like that. But the thing is, you know, the way risk back then was managed, Charlie, was real about recruitment. So it was like, what's your background? What's your experience? What's your attitude? Like, you know, those companies, they wouldn't hire someone that was going to be a liability or make irrational decisions. They weren't going to hire someone that couldn't, you know, spend good hours on a horse and understand how livestock work, you know. So that's, and you know what, with all the training and everything that we've got in place today, I mean, you know, we've got assets all across Australia and assets in the US. You still got experience, common sense,
intuition, and just I always forget the bloody word, not intuition, initiative, yeah.
So anyway, we better get back on track here. So yeah, and then we turn around from Carlton Hill and we do all those rounds all the way back to Newcastle Borders. By then we did that. It's October, November, time to go home for the wet season. So I did that for 2 years, working up there, and it was, you know, if nothing else, I learned to work big days, not a lot of time off. If you did have time off, it was at a rodeo. So you were riding in the rodeo and then load the truck, back out. You mightn't see, you know, you mightn't go back to town for 8 weeks, 6 weeks to the next camp draft and rodeo. But you learn to work, and you learn to get along with people. You know, you're in with 8 or 10 people, and you got to get along. You
know, no doubt know Stu's story, well, some of it I imagine, of his time up there and his kind of epiphanies he had and things that, you know, stood out to him. What did you, so 2 years, and what sort of got you out of there end of year 2?
I couldn't really see a career that was going to satisfy my ambitions. It was great. I learned to work. I learned a lot. I made some good connections, some good friends. Learned a lot about myself. But for me, I didn't think it was going to really advance a career that I'd be proud of.
What did you learn about yourself up there?
You know, I learned pretty early on that, you know, put in some situations I can, you know, like any young guy, I can be a smart ass and get a bit full of myself, like all of us, and that's one of the reasons why you go there, you know, like, it doesn't hurt you to, you know, get a clip under the ear every now and then and put you back in the line, and to get along with other people and how to behave, and, you know, it was a part of a growing up experience. I guess I'm not saying I walked away and I was a new human. I didn't really know what I wanted to do in my life till I was 30, but that played a big part in it. And I needed to get away from, school. I need to get away from my comfort zone. I need to be put out of my comfort zone to kind of get to that, to get some rounding, I think, and become a better human, some more humility.
Did you have these thoughts at the time? Like, were you, I'm not being taking the piss or anything, but was there like reflection going, I need to be, more humble or need to develop more? Or is it kind of just you sort of, on reflection, it was just a subconscious kind of an urge? Were you reading books? Like, I know that's
No, I wasn't. I didn't get passionate really about reading till I really started thinking about mentors and business people that I really idolised. I'm not really into fiction. I'm into fact-based information and biographies and people's stories. That's what really ticks me. And so I came to these realisations later on reflection, Charlie, and you try and think about what's contributed to the person you are, I think, today. It's nothing like a podcast like this when someone says, I want you to talk about your journey, and you reflect on it. And I've had a couple of days to reflect on it. And it's actually really good for the soul to reflect on who you are, how you got here, what you believe, what your purpose is. So, if nothing else, thanks for making me reflect for a couple of days.
I should have just asked you this morning, hey Bert, just pop down with me.
You'd have put me in a spin there.
Well, Bart had some similar, but as he's prone to do, overthink things, and that's his words as well. But that's really nice to hear. I haven't sort of kind of thought of it that way. That this process is a prompting kind of a situation for my guest. So that's at least that must be a good thing then.
Yeah, it is. It's really good. And so to sort of build on, I guess, on that journey, came home from 2 years working in the Northern Territory, and I didn't really grow physically as a human until I got home. I mean, you work so hard, you are going 100%. It wasn't until 12 months later I realised, I've actually put on 6 kilos now, and I haven't got an ounce of fat on me, but I've been able to actually grow. I've got probably a bit better nutrition, a bit more fresh food.
When you went home?
When I finally got, looking back. So got home, and then I thought, righto, I've got some more exploring to do here. And part of that exploring was I thought, my roots historically were in the sheep business. So I went and worked at a couple of larger sheep studs in New South Wales just to try something different.
Any that you care to name?
So one was at a place called Wooloora next door to Bunnock down at Conago.
Okay, yep.
It's about 110,000 acres. Well, it was then. This is in 95.
So we're talking Riverina.
Talking Riverina, yeah.
Yep.
And it was a great place to work. Great old guy that owned it, a guy called Bill Lamb, and, those are the days, Charlie, where, he'd go to town and he had his black top hat and his waistcoat and he'd go once a week to town.
Oh, shit.
And it was just for us young guys to see him do that. It was kind of like...
What was the name of that place again?
Wooloora. Don't know. Willura.
That's cool.
Yeah. And they just grew big riverina, heavy cutting, medium strong merino sheep. And it was great. It was very much a commercial operation, but it had a stud as well. And anyway, part of my learning journey. And then I spent another 6 months at a stud at Warren called Ecology, owned by the Catter family. And
so it was that was in 90.
That was early 96.
So it was Hugh
Lydio. Yeah, he was the manager. Yeah. And another neat guy was the overseer, a guy called Paul Kelly, who's such a character. But we all played footy together in Warren, and used to play against Bert and Coburn, all those places, and bus trips, and that was fun. So we.
So what is it? The Warren? What are the Warren Watts? Rams?
Pumas.
Pumas.
Black and white. Because I like the Yes Rams.
That's right. He couldn't get away from it because the other aspect, I hadn't even thought of that because I was talking to a fellow up at Walgett the other day, Nick Mays, and he says there's other rams up there. There's like the Walgett rams, and there's not the Walgett, Walgett, and there's 3 rams up there.
Oh wow,
rams teams.
No, but we were the Pumas
because that was the sheep thing, you know.
It was, yeah. We were great, and this overseer guy called Paul Kelly played hooker. And he wasn't happy unless he got stitches after every game. It was fun. If things were going not good for us, Paul would just start swinging at someone.
Just to turn it up.
But a great guy. I learned quite a bit from Paul. He's a neat guy. So we're at 1996. Then it was kind of, I finally got the call from the folks, I think it's time to think about coming home and helping out a bit. And, which was really great because I think got that on the system at that point in time, and came home and I think, as part of this journey, it's always interesting when you go home and your parents are still there and they're in charge of the farm and you've been out and you've got some confidence and it's really interesting to start thinking about the management of a farm, business management, succession, finance, performance. So, it's probably the first time, and you've got to remember too, I guess my parents, so this is in the mid-90s, agriculture for them growing up, it was a business, but it was also a bit of a lifestyle. And their formative years, if you go back for them, their formative years is the 50s and 60s. Well, if you're in the wool industry in the 1950s and you're getting £1 a pound, life's pretty good. And so when the economics and then you change, and in the wool industry you get, there was the pricing, the wool price, what was that?
The floor price.
The floor price.
Yeah.
Put together by AWB, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so anyway, economics change, things change. Our family farm, we were looking at expanding and my folks bought some more dirt and we were leasing and we were going quite well. And one thing that, I was really proud of my folks is because, they didn't ever really have a leader or a business coach or anyone. And they sort of went out and decided to participate in a farm benchmarking group. And this farm benchmarking group was made up of about 20 family farmers primarily within a 200k radius from where we were, so from kind of Goulburn to, let's say, Jukiong or whatever. And I think that the group was facilitated by an accountancy firm and ag consultancy firm. Put these people together and you would submit all of your financial data, production data. And for a young guy like me, it really had quite an impact on me in terms of looking at numbers different, looking at what drives production, and then the relationship between production and financial performance. And it was something that probably had quite an influence on me in understanding the value of data, number one. Number two, the business side of agriculture. So it was probably the first time for me that when I started looking at, our performance, our profitability, how productive we were, return on equity, our gearing levels, how we manage debt. Because, we were we're trying to grow, we're trying to expand, we're going to take on, where can we get cheap capital? So, had a real influence on me, and I used to just look at this data, and what was really cool about the process that these guys had put together, Charlie, was every quarter you'd go to someone's farm, and everyone got really comfortable with each other knowing their information and data, and it got to a point where I knew how much debt you had, you knew how much debt I had, you knew if I was going through succession challenges, you knew who was having a divorce. We became quite a well-connected group, but every quarter we'd go to each other's farm and they'd do a presentation on their numbers and we'd have a little farm tour and you could ask as many questions as you like. And then the real kicker for me was when once a year we'd get together, all of us, and it was facilitated, and they would talk about the year in review and who are in the top 20% for any given kind of metric, and it might be beef produced, cost of production of beef, might be cost of production of clean wool, might be return on equity, might be just on
kilos of beef per hectare.
You got it. Yeah.
So it was I guess, essentially a benchmarking group program set up. Who was running that?
So it was Holmes and Sackett. It was Holmes and Sackett together with Boyce and Co.
Yeah, right. And was that their first pilot of that, or they've been doing it elsewhere?
I think that they had other groups. So there was one going down the Monero at the time, and there was a couple other groups around. And we would actually, I think they used to put everyone's data from all around New South Wales that were in these things every now and then. Yep. But for me, the reason why those annual events were great is that they would say, okay, the 5 businesses that were in the top 20% for return on assets, or the top 5 businesses for cost of production per kilo of beef, please come up the front. And those 5 would go up the front. And you could ask any question you wanted. They would share how they got their cost of production so high. And just simple things like, were you focusing more on cost, or were you focusing more on production to get a good outcome of cost of production? Or your return on asset, how are you driving your system with the balance sheet and the assets you had at your disposal? So for me, by this time I'm 25, 26. It was an eye-opener for me, but I used to get that data and I used to look at it and stew on it on the weeks before it and analyse it and think about it.
Had you been a data numbers person before that? Like, was that something at school you're a maths nerd or anything?
No. At school, no. And it was only because it was related to agriculture.
Yeah.
It's the only reason why.
It was relevant.
It was relevant to me, and it was relevant because, how could my family and I, because it was quite interesting for us as a business, depending on what was going on. We were in and out of the top 5% quite a bit, and I was like, how are we going to get this business so that we're up there and stay there? So anyway, that was that. And the reason I bring that up is that it was all about economic performance and production performance. And it helped me realise the importance of data. And when we're talking about a regenerative journey, not once were we talking about back then in the 90s on soil organic carbon, biodiversity metrics, team engagement, social engagement. We didn't have those. But I think for me, I got to understand what drove really good financial performance. And I think as my career progressed from that point in time, I would question some of the performance that we were all experiencing in years of drought. So how were our assets faring in the challenging times in relation to our financial performance? There was no environmental metrics, which, this is the 90s. That was not going to happen. Different point in time, that's fine. But for me, it was a way that I felt when Impact Ag started to really get tracking, we were going to be dogged about metrics relating to the environment and social impact. And so one of the first things when we started really reporting to our investors, it was going to be impact reporting, and we were going to hoover whatever information and data we felt was going to be relevant to demonstrate what we were doing in addition to financial performance.
Clearly, and that's what a lot of yesterday's talks at day one here was about. Not specifically. It was the ecology, the importance of ecology as a driving force for economics. We didn't to drill down all the numbers, and if you do this, you're going to get X dollars per hectare or whatever. But it was more the importance of the asset or the value of the asset and the performance of the asset and I guess which at any one point in time you can measure, and there's lots of variables of course, but it was about, well, how can we actually improve that, to be the driving force, the goose that's laying the golden eggs, how can we fatten it up, how can we give it some buddies, how can we what sort of feed do we need to give it to keep it ever regenerating, and which is I guess addressing degradation in some ways, but just a general generation of biology, soil health, all those wonderful things. So and again, I guess back then the numbers you're looking at were financial, which was pretty important. Did you ever at any point then go, oh, I wonder what our soil's doing? Or
no, not in the sort of context that you and I think about it today. But I think, like you and your family farm, soil test and soil health was all about the impact it had on plant production and then the financial outcomes of that plant production. So it was in the context of production. So we were testing soil and doing all these other things, but it was like more about what's the problem we were trying to fix so we could grow X or perform better with Y, as opposed to how are my soils, how can I improve the overall health of my soil. There was none of that thinking back then.
So benchmarking, family farm, I guess happy?
Happy, yep, thinking about the next challenge. Actually, at home and looking at that horse reminds me 1999, was really lucky, went to the US for 3 months and worked with a guy. I know you like to talk about mentors sometimes, a guy who was kind of unofficial, the kind of first horse whisperer, a guy called Ray Hunt, who was amazing with horses. And a friend of mine and I, we flew to Colorado Springs. We did a horse clinic, so starting young horses. He'd been to Australia. We'd kind of known him. We went over there to do some intense horse clinics. We went to Colorado Springs, did a clinic, and at the end of the clinic he came up and goes, "You two Aussies want to come work with me for a while?" And we just went, "Hell yeah."
Did you know the other Aussie, or you just turned
Yeah. No, a mate of mine, I work in the territory. So that was just amazing, this guy that we'd idolised, and it was all about natural horsemanship, and Ray Hunt is a guy who doesn't care too much for humans, but he cares a lot about horses. So there could be for some participants in those clinics, there was a baptism of fire, because, if you were doing the wrong thing by the horse or weren't giving the horse the opportunities he felt that the horse could have, well, you'd get the wrath of Ray Hunt. Yeah. And there was plenty of people that went out with their jaw on the ground and, that wasn't for them, but he was all about the horse, and he was great for us, and he was amazing. We had a lot of fun with him. We travelled and stayed with him a lot, did all these clinics, and because he had one lung at that time, he's 70, we were on all these young horses for him. We learned so much, and he was a good human about being humble. I don't know if you've ever heard the poem, The Man in the Glass.
No.
It's a cracking poem. If you ever get to read it, it goes, I'll forget, but it goes something like, when you get, I can't remember it now. It's like, and the world makes you king for a day. Go to the mirror and look at yourself and see what the man has to say. It isn't your mother or father or wife whose judgment upon you must pass, whose verdict will count most in your life is the one staring back in the glass. So,
wow.
But it goes on for, I can't quite.
Did he write that? No.
No, he didn't.
Something
He didn't, but he used to sit there on his horse
quote it
at these horse clinics and quote it, and it's all about you. Don't bring your baggage. Don't try and blame anyone else. Go and have a look at the mirror. Sort your life out. So great for me to, again, humbling experience. Really kind of good timing for me, and I really enjoyed it. Learned a lot. Had some fun. Fell in love with North America. And then so in terms of journey, that's 1999. Then started thinking about the next challenge. Started to get involved with big farm down at Cavan, a farm called Cavan Station at Yass. Started to do some work there. Had a small contracting business to make a bit extra cash.
Mustering and stuff.
Mustering and, back then, landmarking and weaning and calf marking, and had a little team, a little posse of guys who used to work for me and doing a few different things.
When you just back a step, you said looking for the next challenge. Was that actually how you looked at it? Or you're reflecting on saying they are challenges as you sort of, change your life and things come up? Or were you actually searching for, I need to kind of push my boundaries a bit?
Yeah. I had some inner ambition that I wanted to, expectations on myself, I guess. So, and I kind of was looking for the next thing to get my teeth into, I guess. So, started working more and more at Cavan Station. It grew a lot in 2000. It doubled in size. And yeah, that's kind of when I got into some senior management positions in managing a bunch of people. We had a sheep stud there that we developed a lot of AI, and it was a big commercial beast and challenging geography to manage. So yeah, I was there for quite a bit. And then in terms of the journey, I think, and this is kind of, you will probably say in some of your podcasts, was there a point in time that really turned things around in your journey? So I think in 2005, 2006, in that part of the world, there was a major drought, and it was a shocker. We lost those production systems, as you know, really rely on that spring growth. From a pasture point of view. Anyway, we missed the spring 2005. And it was 2005, 2006 were really influential years in my life because 2005, I got married. My wife, from Vancouver, Canada, she came over. We got married in 2005. We had our first son. No, go back a bit. My dad died of cancer in December 2005. Then my grandmother died 6 weeks later. And then my son was born 4 weeks later. So this is early 2006. And when you get slapped in the face with death and seeing loved ones die, I think, again, that was a turning point for me to say, I think the question I ask myself is, what would I be proud of when I get put in a pine box? And then you start thinking about, what would my children be proud of? And what legacy will I leave my children? So that all happened around that time. And so we still had my mother on our family farm. I was working at Cavan. So kind of juggling, what are we going to do with these assets? We had some plans around what we're going to do with the assets, but it needed execution. And at the same time, we're in the middle of this bad drought. I'm working at Cavan. We go into early 2006, and the manager at the time, the drought wasn't being managed very well, and the manager gets fired
because of the condition of the farm and just not managed well.
Yeah, I think it was probably more that there wasn't a plan for the future. Yeah. So not only the externalities were there for everyone, how had it had been managed to that point in time? I think that was the family down there weren't comfortable with, owned by a family that a kind of investor that looking in saying, I'm not sure this is quite right. Mm-hmm. And wasn't a real plan for the future. So it's kind of like, something's got to change. And that's when, my relationship with Alistair McLeod starts. He's part of the family, based in Australia. His job to fix it. He rings. I was at a point in time in my life where I was like, I'm not sure this environment's quite for me. Mm. I was quite comfortable to look for the next challenge. I was actually on holidays in Coffs Harbour, and Alistair rang me and said, I've just fired the manager. Can you fly home tonight? And I need you to settle the ship. And
you see, you were working full-time there at that point? You were like overseer or...
Yeah, I was like 2 IC in a challenging environment, and, you know, just, it was a good example of, probably at the time, the in-farm gate community. You can imagine the stress associated with drought. And then there was, you know, the team wasn't as cohesive as they are today, and lots had to change. And I'd kind of decided, and I'd had a couple of opportunities brought to me to move on, and so I'd kind of made the call to move on. And then Alistair rang and said, you better come back.
Was that call to get you on holiday? He knew you were on holiday,
yeah.
And to get you to essentially get home that day. Was that a test, do you think? Because I mean, he could have said, "Oh, I'll give you 2 more days." Like, you know, the world's not going to go to the shit in 2 days. But
I don't think it was a test. It was,
he needed to sort it out.
He needed to sort it out, and he knew my style. I know now and know his wife like for quite a while. So he knew that I'd do the right thing. He knew I'd come back and help out. He knew that I knew.
Could depend on you.
He knew that I knew the situation really well, and that something had to change as well.
He was opening a door for you. I mean, which he probably sensed, knowing now, he probably sensed that was, well, certainly an opportunity that you may have thought of, but, you know, when situations are what they are, I mean, to have that door open for you, that was a good thing.
Oh, yeah, so I just turned 30, and I was the second youngest on the start, and it was like, Alistair's like, right, you and I together, we're going to turn this business around. And we both learned a lot from each other in those early years. It was like, what do we want to do and what do we not want to do? Well, we knew we didn't want to be where we'd been. We weren't going to manage drought like that again. We weren't going to see a landscape like that again. Our assets could not be like that again. The balance sheet couldn't handle this anymore. And our people, we really needed to start thinking about how we're going to take people on a different journey. We didn't know what the journey was going to be, by the way. We had to do a lot of exploring. And that meant, you know, he and I spending a week up at, we did that sustainable agriculture course, Graham's State.
Up at
we did that.
Rockville or something.
Yep. Nambour. Kevin Rudd's electorate.
Why was that significant? That was like Kevin 07.
I just remember every morning going to this course talking about cancer. So, you know, Alistair came from a business background, a media background. I came from an agricultural background. It was kind of a neat mix in that I had the execution skills, he had the business skills. Between us, if we could work out what the right principles and practice were going to be, we could do something really cool. So we went, you know, we had Graham Ward come and talk to us. We went, you know, down to the Coglins and Albury. You know, we had David Marsh come over. We were just exploring what are other people doing. Went to the Malone Institute. What's some other ways of going about this? And you know, that was really interesting. And then, whilst we're trying to fix that farm up, we were in this position, and we had some pretty substantial feed bills for livestock. And I was there one day, and I'd done this feed budget, and I said, the amount of money I'm going to ask the family here to put in, I could buy another farm. And this is like 2007. 2007. And it was like, well, if you're going to buy another farm, where would you buy it? And so if you open a clean slate and a map, I ended up with a map with 3 circles. One had a circle around Walker, one had a circle around Ben Lomond, and one had a circle around Ebor. And come November 2007, we ended up in Ebor.
Now, why Ben Lomond, Walker and Ebor?
Soil and rainfall.
And was that a calculation you kind of...
It was a counter-cyclical rainfall pattern to what we had in southern New South Wales, so it was strategic. And back then I was thinking that those two farms were going to interact with livestock production and maybe even labour and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, in all realities, they're too far apart. That was never really going to work in hindsight. I mean, I think we did a couple of cattle, we've done some cattle trades between the two, but it was about, but when you think about it as a group and financial performance and whatnot, even having counter-cyclical climatic and different growing conditions and seasons, it still made some really good sense. So, I think by April 2008, this place wasn't, you know, Wilmot wasn't even on the market officially. I remember Alistair was getting on a plane to go to New Zealand, and we'd done the deal one Friday afternoon. And
did you tap someone on the shoulder? Or if it wasn't on the market, did you say this is a good spot?
No, we found this real estate agent, and he said, I do know of this place that sounds like what you want. He said, it's not officially on the market, but I think if the right people came along, he'd consider it. So this guy, this real estate agent, made the call to the owner, and he had some pretty lofty expectations, and I got a independent val done on it, and I said, look, we'll pay the val, and we got the deal done.
Yeah, nice. Did you move up here? No, you stayed down there.
No, I used to come here once a month and Alistair was still working full time in Sydney by that time. So Alistair would fly up on the weekends. We'd come up once a month. So
you were kind of not overseeing, but you were managing from afar. You were.
Yeah, I was the general manager. We had a manager on the farm, and we had teams here. Back then, it was a bullock trading business back then. So yeah, and I guess in terms of my journey, I mean, a great learning experience here with this farm, a great lab to try things, and in terms of the journey that we were on around how we're going to do things different, it took us 2 or 3 years to realise what we did and didn't want to do here, what we wanted to achieve. So, in terms of getting into more regenerative types of practices, you know, we had to change some key staff just to get the right team on board, you know, to come on the journey with us. So we had to do that after a few years. But in terms of my journey, this was definitely a part of it, and this farm Wilmot, and you know, the whole Wilmot story is probably a story best left for someone like Stu or whatnot, where we've made more acquisitions to fit strategically into the long-term investment strategy. So Impact Ag Partners has been very much involved in that, but Stu's probably a better one to elaborate more on that. I think for me though, in my journey, it just really made me realise that investors need trusted, professional business partners for investments in real assets in agriculture. And if the future, in playing a role, when I look now, we believe the role that agriculture can play in decarbonising the atmosphere, producing clean food and fibre, all the things that you and I are passionate about. People that can come and manage capital, managing investments is going to be in high demand. And so for us, that was the catalyst to really put some capital and some investment into Impact Ag and really try and catalyse that. And, you know, first couple of years, yeah, we had a lot of red ink on our P&L because we hired a lot of people and, you know, like any starting business, but it wasn't long, 18 months, 2 years. We're profitable and we're out running around the world trying to raise capital.
So that sort of journey from overseeing at Cavan, there have been some challenges, you meeting those challenges with Al, and then there's kind of some extra more thinking and the acquisition of Wilmot. I mean, that was a good grounding, like a test program for Impact Ag, I guess. It was like, well, let's analyse the situation, let's pinpoint a spot and think about why and how and where. Dollars involved. When did Impact Ag start officially? And when did you come up here when it did? Is that because that was sort of...
Well, our first cut of Impact Ag was, the first business was Ag Investments Management, and that was still whilst we were down in southern New South Wales, and we had, I think, probably 5 clients, 5 investors that we were managing assets for. And then when we moved up here in 2013 to Armidale, we rebranded, really hunkered down on this, and we'd kind of been involved with some investors in fixing up other investors' problems and starting to raise some external money when Impact Ag really got going in Armidale, and we put the right people in the right seats in the business. We could then, it just then enabled us to really go out and market ourselves, and that's when we started going.